Do you hear that recording on your end?
Yeah, and I have to choose leave meeting or continue. So I continue. I'm leaving the meeting.
So yeah, that was like a big, for anyone who's listening, a big like voice came over and said, this meeting is being recorded. And then on the other side, you have to like choose to run away quickly. Is that one of the choices? Run and get the hell out of here, or say okay?
Yeah, you could run or you could stay. It all depends on your risk level.
Well, thank you for staying. But yeah, so just a quick intro. My name is Jessica Mashkovich. This is One Take with Jess. I am the host. I haven't been here in a while, but now I'm back. Yay. And my guest today is Linda. Oh, pronounce your last name.
Wawrzyniak.
Wawrzyniak.
Yep.
A friend, a writer, a psychologist in a way, but you're not. You're definitely influencing people in bringing their best selves forward. And you work with Major League Baseball. And you and I were chatting on the phone, and we were talking about so many things. And I was like, oh my gosh, I actually need to have you on the podcast. We met through Clubhouse, and it was Clubhouse is where all the people who think they're talking business go, and they talk business and personal and pick other people's brains. Yeah. You're good at picking brains.
I have to say, you should have done this a long time ago, because some of the comments that you make, I'm like, that's brilliant. Like, you need to be doing this kind of stuff, because I don't know. You have just a great way of saying things.
Thank you.
That you really do impact others. So I think this is the next best platform for you, which I think is good.
Well, thank you. And I take that to heart, because you do have a way of seeing the higher level of what's going on. I believe one time either it was you or David who I was talking about my business, and you're like, you're not particularly happy in what you're doing, are you? That was you.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to be so blunt.
Oh my God, you saw right through me. And I was like, you know what? And then we had further conversations to like dissect that. I take what you're saying to heart. Let's talk about the fact that, first of all, you wrote a book.
I did. Guess what? I just got the very first hard copy. So like, I'm excited about that.
That is amazing. That's like going to be on the fireplace forever, on the mantle.
Yeah, I'm just like, I was so excited. It happened yesterday. I was like, yeah.
So that is $1 Million Adjustment is the name of the book.
Yeah, $1 Million Adjustments, the power of small change on performance, productivity, and peace.
Inside that book is chock full of everything. I'm sure it relates a lot back to the Major League Baseball, but in this book are life skills, which, is it still on pre-order?
Yes, it doesn't actually launch until the first day of the World Series, which is October 26th.
Okay. Oh, very monumental.
Yeah, I didn't plan that. That was completely random.
Happy coincidence, for sure.
Yeah. Trying to do publicity around that, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah. But you know what? It's perfect timing, because we live in a world right now, even like the topic of writing this type of book, we live in a world where we're just continuously trying to do everything and wonder why we're not doing any of it exceptionally well.
Exactly.
And we're disappointed with ourselves. So our self-confidence goes down. And when our self-confidence goes down, our anxiety levels go up. And when our anxiety levels go up, we're just fearing everything. And now we're depressed. And then we're taking pills. And then we're talking about it on Clubhouse.
Right. We hear a lot about that on Clubhouse, don't we?
We do. But it might be because people are approaching everything wrong. So tell us how everything is to be approached.
Well, in chapter 3, I actually talk about disruptors and drivers. And we are in a time right now of huge disruption. I mean, we have been in that time of disruption, but it's really big. And these disruptive things, and I name a few in there, because where does this whole idea of adjustment come from? Yes, it comes from baseball, because in order to succeed, you have to make adjustments. But it's also very relevant for everybody now because of this huge disruption, this period of disruption. So it's in technology, in the way people date, swipe up, swipe right. It's in, our transportation system. It's in our healthcare system. It's in our education system. I mean, all of these things are converging to this huge point of disruption. And I think that leaves the regular person going, heart palpitations. Oh my gosh, I've got to do this, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do this. And how do I stay ahead of this disruption? How do I handle this disruption? And I think that creates this whole anxiety and all of these things that we are talking about on Clubhouse. And people don't know how to actually make great adjustments. They just solve the immediate fire, or they just go to the immediate fire that they can, at the same time that they're trying to climb the ladder of success. So we're throwing fires out and we're climbing the ladder. We're throwing fires out and we're climbing the ladder. And that's really not a very, it's definitely not a peaceful way to live. But it's also not necessarily the most productive, which is why I put that in there. Peaceful, productive, perform. We're not necessarily, haven't figured out that there's actually a formula for doing this that's a little less crazy. So that's kind of why I felt really inclined to write this book.
Yeah, we're supposed to be enjoying our lives and working at the same time so we can make money or gain achievements in order to enjoy our lives. But we're just constantly rushing and racing for the next and the next and the next. And it's like, where does it end? And are you getting satisfaction while you're doing it? And everyone says, oh, just do your passion, whatever your passion is. Some people never discover their passion. I was talking yesterday to some people about what did my grandfather use as inspiration and motivation. We're constantly listening to podcasts and talking to the next person and the next person. What do you think I should do? What do you think I should do? If only I had the courage, if only I had this, am I an imposter? My grandfather was a super hard worker, successful guy, no internet, small town. His social circle or whatever were just like, 3 men that he had coffee with and played cards with. And I don't think that they turned to each other and were like, how do I stay motivated?
Right. They were more like, how do I, make sure my kid doesn't get into this kind of trouble, or what do I do over here? It wasn't really about how to, their own personal paths. You're right. Like in terms of work, I don't think they were having those conversations.
They weren't. And they weren't really thinking of self-care. They were thinking of self-care as self-satisfaction. And I put food on my table. Right. And I was able to buy my grandkid a new bike. And, there was a lot of different ways that they were seeing successes. And I think everyone is wanting to see the success before they put in the hard work. There was only hard work before that.
Yes. Like hard work was the road to success.
Right. And if you made it, you made it. If not, you still took your family on a picnic.
Right.
On the journey, exactly. Just working as hard as I can. The nails were dirty. I remember the guy who owned our local garage, he always had grease in his fingerprints. Like they never would come out. He was a mechanic. That's what he did. And you saw the labor on his hands.
But we've lost the art of doing it well versus doing it all.
Yes.
And that's something that I've kind of talked about in other podcasts, but it's really true. In order to do things well, you have to take some time, you have to make adjustments along the way, but you're not focused on the speed culture. And I think the reason we're focused on speed culture is because of all these different disruptors that are happening. They're coming at us so fast that speed has become almost these underlying quiet cultural focus. We don't even realize it, but speed has kind of overtaken our lives, and I think that's why we try to keep up with it, and that has created all kinds of work issues and expectations of work that I don't think are realistic. You know what I mean?
I do. I definitely do. But so you're not a life coach per se that just decided to hang a shingle and be a life coach. Nope. You are someone who never even thought that you'd be doing this. So tell me a little bit about how you ended up going in this, because it's just a sequence that sometimes happens. Sometimes people know what they want and they may not ever become that because they get diverted by some other interest or some other job or some other role,
Yeah.
parenthood, or, you know, a different opportunity. Husband moves to Michigan and you move the family to Michigan when you least expect it, you know? So it's not a straight road. And tell me how your journey started. Oh, wait, speaking of journey, I don't know if this is going to come through.
Enjoy the journey. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's important to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Some people it. um, I think that for me, like just honestly, without giving you the really long version,
I like the long version.
you like the long version? Okay, well, I just don't want to. So, my background, I got the advice, you know, when I got out of high school, when I was going to college, go into something that's very marketable. And at the time, what was very marketable for women was, if it wasn't healthcare or like education, it was STEM, or it was like science, technology. That was a big thing coming up. So my older brother pushed me in that direction, which at the time made sense. So I went into engineering, which has absolutely nothing to do with this. Well, it kind of has to do with this book, but not. So I spent some years working for Fortune 500 companies and a Fortune 500 company, and I traveled a lot. And I saw at that time, and this is aging me, but that was back in the 80s, early 90s. I saw AI at that time, artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. And when I tell people that, they're like, "You saw that back then?" I'm like, "Yes, I did." And we were, you know, that was already happening. And so
I was programming that on my Commodore 64.
That's hilarious.
You and I are similar age.
Right. It's so funny. So I ended up taking that, and, you know, I didn't really like that much, that whole engineering, but I learned some amazing things. And that is, there's basically a few things I took away from that. One is systems are really important. You have to have systems. And the other one is, it's okay to talk about failure, because when you have a system and it fails, you can figure out how to work through it. And so we were writing something called failure mode effect analysis. I had to make these analyses all the time of everything that would fail. At the time, I was working in the automotive industry. So imagine you're creating an airbag, and oh, what happens if that fails? Oh, that guy dies. So now we're talking about death, and we're saying that's like the worst case scenario. So that's definitely failure. How do we avoid that? And so then we start going back into, like, you know, the engineering side of it. Let's make sure that doesn't happen. And we went through all the things there. So that training was so, I didn't know it at the time, was so important, because I took that with me everywhere I went. And so after I left there, I became a mom, stayed home for a while, did some teaching in the night, saw failure everywhere, saw change, you know, and it never really bothered me that much, because here I was trained to handle failure. That was what we talked about all the time.
Right.
And so took those concepts into, you know, what I was doing next, and with, you know, help my kids and, you know, teaching. Then I got into baseball by accident.
Yeah. So I'm going to back you up for a second, because I know a little bit about you. You didn't just go into teaching and go into having a family. There were a lot of decisions that came into play. You know, when you, I'll just, you know, repeat what you had previously said on your daughter's podcast. Oh my God, by the way, she is like a little success, not little. She's an adult, she's married, right? And she's a person, but she interviewed you as her mother and as someone that her audience could benefit from. And you did tell your story similar to this one, but you did talk about the struggle of, you know, could I do it all? What do I want to do? Where do I want to dedicate my time? And there is an expiration date on becoming a mother. So when you think about your career and your training and saving lives with airbags and making stuff in order to break stuff and learn from it, you chose to pursue the parent direction and dedicate your time to that, because you knew that that too is a full-time job. 100%. So when we're trying to be parents and we're trying to solve world hunger and tackle the environment and start our new business, that's a lot of times where we end up getting all mucked up. And so you did dedicate time to raise your family, and during that time.
Yeah. when I got pregnant with my daughter, I was working as an engineer, and I said, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And so I decided that it would be better to take a little break. And in that process, I don't know, this is just from my daughter's podcast, I'll say it here. I was I was nursing, but we had this little dog, and this little dog would always be, looking out the window or wouldn't be let out or anything. He had a lot of energy. So I would always have to get up and then take my hand and try to help the dog. So just as having this engineering mind, I just came up with this little contraption that would kind of help me do that. My brother-in-law comes over one day and he goes, wow, what is that? And I explain it to him. He says, you need to do something with that. Like, you should probably do that. So, oh, your dog, right on you. So I ended up coming up with this little prototype, and then I patented it, and I actually sold it to Target. That's the first time I had the realization. Then Target wanted all this. I mean, it was crazy. It blew up. And I was like, wait a minute. I just left this engineering job. So I'm not sure I want to do all this. And that was the first time I had to say, what's most important to me? What do I want to do well? Because I probably could do it all, but I can't really do it all without like something giving. So I chose parenting at the time, and I kind of sold the rights to that, and I didn't pursue that. I've never regretted that decision. So I guess as you know about me on Clubhouse, I'm a big believer in selling and knowing when to sell. I knew then that was the time to sell. So then at that time, raised my kids, did some teaching in the evening because they were looking for, people who had the STEM background. And I'm also bilingual. So I was teaching in a bilingual situation. And then that's because of the bilingual capacity, that's when baseball came calling. And I had I didn't play baseball. I didn't play softball. I had no reason to be in it other than the education part. And it was through that I was like, wow, we need a system teaching. There was nothing. Major League Baseball at the time was getting all these guys from other countries, and there was nothing helping them integrate. And so there was culture shock, and there was just all kinds of issues. So
is that what you were brought in to teach them? English and culture and
just life skills and how to live in this country and be competitive at a really high level. So the very first class I walk into, I see these guys that are huge, and and they're really strong, and they're all different countries. I'm like, I felt so intimidated. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. And there's no book, and there's no you basically are on your own. So I just started teaching and I had done some English teaching for STEM prior to that. So I had some ideas and definitely some training. So I went back and got some training. And long story short, I came up with the curriculum, and
you created this curriculum out of scratch?
Yes, because I started calling, asking Major League Baseball, do you have anything? They didn't have anything. Nobody had anything. So I just basically, and it's different in baseball because you don't have 12 years to educate somebody. You have 4 years maybe to get them up to speed. So it had to be done differently, and I had to disrupt the academic approach to this because it wasn't there. So that's what I did, and it was amazing. I mean, we were seeing great results. We were doing some different systems, but I was using the principles of adjustment. And so I started testing these guys, why is this guy getting it over this guy? And we had some coaches that would say, oh, that's because he had a good education in his home country. But I didn't see that. Sometimes I saw guys with great educations who weren't learning.
Learning what? What were the skills that they were trying to hone in on? What were the major life skills or learning skills that you were trying to bring to the table?
At that time, it was language development. So they were learning English. A lot of these guys didn't have English as their background. It eventually got a bit much bigger than that, but it started with English. And I just didn't see, people were saying, oh, if they have a really good education from their home country, they're going to learn this with no problem. But I didn't always see it that way. So I started, well, what's the differentiator? Again, putting on the engineering hat. Let's really get into this and figure out what the variables are. And so finally, I realized that it was how a person made an adjustment. So then, being the engineering background, I said, I have to test this. I have to find a way to put metrics on this, because I can talk about this all day long, but I need to be able to measure it. So then I started doing that, came up with I kind of collected a team of people that I knew from different times in my career. And we actually came up with a test, and I started testing people. And that test, one day I'm sitting in a meeting with minor league baseball, and I didn't know there was a scout in the room, but we're in player development. And I'm sitting in the room with all these guys, and we're talking about different players. And I said, does this player do this and this? Because I had never seen these guys play, certain guys. And they're like, yeah, how'd you know that? And I said, yeah, because I tested them. And they're like, what do you mean you tested them? I said, yeah, I had this test I developed, see how they would do it, how they would make adjustments. This is what I'm seeing. Are you seeing that? And they're like, how did you know that?
Yeah.
And I said, that's from the test.
That validates the test for sure.
Yeah. So started traveling. The one scout said, we need you to travel in the draft. We need you to test the guys before we sign them.
Is this like a personality test or a threshold test or no?
No. Only thing it's measuring is how a person makes an adjustment after failure. That's it.
Huh. So when you test cardio fitness, your heart muscle, the test is really about how quickly your heart recovers from strenuous exercise. Right. So this was more measuring on a recovery side of things, how quickly they bounce back from adversity, or how quickly they're able to move forward or get their head back in the game or make an adjustment in order to, I guess.
Yeah, that's the key thing, because I had to define, and you're actually getting to it right now. Well, what is an adjustment? Can't really measure it if you don't know what it is, right? So I went around and asked coaches everywhere, what exactly is an adjustment? Because they were all talking about, well, he makes good adjustments, he doesn't. So when I went around and asked, and I worked for years in this business, in this industry, and I ran across hundreds of coaches. Nobody could answer that. They never said, well, it's exactly this. They would say, well, it might be, it's how he moves his hip, or yeah, I get that from that perspective. But like, what is that? What do you call that? Like, how does he translate, verbal information into physical action? Like, what do you think? Isn't it? Well, that's part of it. I mean, so they couldn't really define it for me. So that's when I went on this like journey to define it. And then I tested against it. So once I started testing thousands of people, I started seeing all kinds of patterns emerge, similar patterns. And I was like, I would go into these meetings, I try to explain it to these people, and they'd be like, huh? So that's when I said, I got to write a book about this, because they need to understand what I found, the results that I have found. And in this process, this was really just going to be a baseball book. That's all it was ever going to be for baseball people. But then as I started talking to my literary agent and the publisher, and I started writing, I'm like, wait a minute, this can actually benefit a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So that's why I started to get on Clubhouse, because that was never my intent, and to just kind of start talking about it, which was kind of awkward for me at the beginning, because I was like, I'm not sure if people are getting this message. I don't think they're understanding what I'm trying to say here. So it took me a little while to figure out how to translate what I found for anybody,
Well, I mean, having data behind a lot of what is said in terms of like key performance metrics, KPIs, key performance indicators, that like businesses use that to measure if they're being productive or if they're being successful in a line of business or marketing campaign or anything else in financial world. But so do you have KPIs that you kind of have defined in there in order to measure these? I know a lot of research and data have pulled a lot of, or extrapolated a lot of different things that people didn't know, whether it's about your motivation levels or the difference between countries, nationalities, sexes, a whole host of things that we've talked about in Clubhouse that have been brought up. in the groups, like how do women behave versus men behave in certain circumstances. And so what are some of the things that you use to measure, or any process that you use to measure, or any of the cool findings?
Well, we have the PAR test, which is performance adjustment response test, and that gives us an immediate feel for where people make adjustments. It's actually on my website, and there is a test that we provide. I mean, it was never commercially available. It was only ever inside professional baseball. So now it's available, but it tells us exactly kind of when things break down. And then the 5 things that we're actually looking for are beliefs, internal timing, strategic actions, information synthesis, and knowledge. You can see that all in this test, and there's not a single word on this test. It's not a paper pencil test at all. The thing that we see, for example, let's talk about beliefs. We're not looking at all your belief systems. What we're looking at is one of the most important is subjective probability. So like, what's subjective probability? Okay, so let's say you go on a date, you're dating. You go on a date, it fails. What are you going to think about dating now? What do you think the probability of your next date is going to be great?
Is that a question?
Yeah, for example.
Yeah, next time will be a good one.
Okay.
If this one wasn't great, then next time will sure be a good one.
Okay, so you go on the next date with the next guy, and it's terrible. So now what? Now you got the third one ready. What are you thinking? How's it going to go?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the probability goes down, and then to a point where it's like, why bother putting my bra on for this?
Exactly. So you decide your beliefs. That's the belief. Your belief is like, hey, the probability is pretty low. You might not use the word probability, but in your mind, you're like, yeah, it's probably, this isn't going to go good.
Yeah.
So now your belief system changes. And so how does that affect your adjustment?
Yeah, very much so. It probably stalls it, or, makes it go backwards, retards it.
Yeah. So now so these are kinds of things, just so then you're saying, okay, so when I talk about beliefs, I'm looking at, one of the things that we're looking at is what's your probability look like? And this really impacts how you make an adjustment. So, I mean, that's kind of the nerdy stuff. As my daughter and I say, like, that's the nerdy piece of all of this. But the book isn't that nerdy. There's a lot of other things in there too that aren't, a lot of stories. Even have a story about my daughter in there too. But just different things that.
But talk nerdy to me. That's like part of those data are to help life. So like you just said about life and dating and maybe marriage or raising kids, how can another one of your principles be used to help you fail forward, or change behavior? So once you analyze the behavior and you have your PAR score, what can you do to optimize that, or make you more successful in this world? Because again, we're always striving for success, and I do have to mention again, everyone get your sleep that's required. You don't have to hustle all the time. You don't have to be always successful. Good enough is sometimes just good enough. But when you are in Major League Baseball, you are there because you are the top of the top, and
Right.
Your pinnacle of your career is likely within those 4 years. So if you're going to shine, you better shine bright. So yeah, we are talking about those types of things. But how is this like a life book?
Absolutely. Well, because we're all in a state of disruption again, we all will be making adjustments, like huge adjustments. So let's take it in terms of, an example might be, let's forget business for a minute, and let's just take it in terms of raising let's say parenting. Okay. So now you've got a child who might be not that motivated in your mind. You might be going, wow, this child very much so doesn't really seem to get it. Like, I have to tell them 10 times and do the same thing. And they just don't seem to really be driven to do anything. And so you go, what do? You use things that maybe your parents used, or maybe you read a book and you take some tips out of there, whatever. And you start to try to get this child to be more motivated, to do more things, to do things on time. But what you don't really realize is this child may not be motivated, but also their timing might be very, very different from yours. And they have an internal timing, right? And of course, developmentally, as our central nervous systems develop, everyone does have a different timing, but and that can change based on hormones as well. But overall, teaching a child his or her adjustment pattern is hugely beneficial. And then they go, huh, what is that? And so as soon as you're able to show them, hey, you know what I noticed? I noticed that right after something happens, or if you're not sure how to do it, I've noticed that, it kind of takes you several days to really want to try that again. So here's something that you could do that might make this a little bit more successful for you, because kids want to be successful too. And the reason they don't do things is because they don't think they can be successful, or they're not sure why that success matters yet. And so when you start telling them, hey, you know what, this is going to help you get success in an area that maybe you didn't even know you needed, or maybe that is really going to be good for you. Kids are drawn to that, and they don't even know why. So I think it's just wired in us in many ways. So these are the kinds of things, when you know your adjustment pattern and you know your child's adjustment pattern, then you can have conversations that you never had before. Mm-hmm. That you can suddenly bring out new terminology that they are like, oh, because they're not dumb. They're not dumb at all. They just need some different angles.
Yeah.
And when we're always going to the same angles, our kids are not necessarily, picking up on that, or they kind of drown it out. So why, here they're playing, think about what they're doing. They're in the speed culture. They're seeing things happen so fast on their phones and in video games and on computer screens, and they don't understand, like they can hardly handle much. We talk a lot about cognitive load in baseball, because there's a point where you just shut down, you shut things off. And for kids, or for family members, or even husbands and wives, the cognitive load, you may not be aware of that person's cognitive load, or you think they're just ignoring you or whatever, but they've probably met their cognitive load level. And so now they're not going to be willing to do a lot of these adjustments, or even figure out how to get to this certain point to where they need to be. So I don't know if that's answering your question or not, but
yeah, very much so. And I just kind of like, my mind went in so many different directions. Like that was such a good example about parenting and children, and teaching them how to handle those types of things, which I think a lot of parents aren't good at. But so there probably should be a parent version of this book, and a coach's version of this book, and a children's version of this book, because these are like the most influential people in our kids' lives. And at the younger age, they are pretty malleable. And they're also like sponges. So if we surround them with stress and anxiety and pattern that as parents, that we aren't handling stuff that's happening around us very well, then chances are the kid is going to have anxiety issues and also not handle stuff well. So, that's always been a goal of parents, to display the actions that you want your kid to have in the future. And a lot of parents do it wrong, and they just don't do that. But yeah, I could totally see that. And the coaches being on the baseball field and in Little League and T-ball, all of that, some are on their best behavior, some are not great instructors and handling things and teaching the kids how to handle things. Right. And it could ruin the sport for the kid. It doesn't matter if it's a soccer coach or a karate instructor or whomever. So yeah, when you have people in these roles, this would be a great handbook and guide for them to be doing it right in the first place.
Well, that's true. That's true in the workplace. That's true in our families. That's true in our marriages. That's true in our friendships. I feel like we definitely have all these different areas and touch points of where like what I want to say is where anxiety kind of comes in, and where there's this lack of understanding. And that's one of the things I say is the very first thing that you can do from this, the very biggest takeaway I think, is to start using the word adjustments. For whatever reason, people love that word more so than change. And I think that's why, or failure. I mean, we don't say failure in sports, never. And I think that's because you want to turn it around, look at it from a positive standpoint and say, okay, what adjustments do we need to make?
Mm-hmm.
And our own, it's just a different feeling that it gives, and especially to young adults and kids, when you start talking about things happening that way, it's a whole different, it sets the tone in a different way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, it definitely does. I can see great things from this, and I hope it's embraced. What's the plan? First of all, how did you sit yourself down to write a book? Does that take a certain discipline in itself? And then what's your plan going forward for marketing it? Because now it becomes like that product that you had. Everything is a product. It's a widget. So now your book is a widget, and we got to figure out how to get it into people. It's a throwbie. We got to get it on people,
right.
in people's hands.
By the way, I love the throwbie.
Thank you.
Yeah. No. So sitting down to write the book, it was harder than I thought. I kind of did it in the winter time, and so that wasn't bad, but it really does take discipline. It's like anything else. You have to sit down. I had to tell myself every day I was going to sit down, and I sat down for 2 hours every day and wrote. I did that for 3 months solid, and so then it was done. So
did you come up with an outline first, and
yeah.
then okay,
yeah, you have to have an outline, and then you have to write a chapter, and then you have to do a chapter synopsis to sell it to a publisher. So that was already done. That was done in the fall of last year. And then once I got the okay, then I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm writing this. So I then sat down every day and said, okay, I got to be disciplined, because then I had a timeline, and that always helps. So then I was like, okay, I have to get this done. And that's what I did, just hammered it out. So now the marketing side of it, and I will use it in my day-to-day work. So it's not just, I'll use it as a trade book, but I also think that it's going to be, what I plan to do is I plan to talk to like organizations and say, hey, this is something your employees need to read. And then kind of take from a corporate mentality or standpoint. And then I also want to try to, I do have a publicist, and I do have, other people working on interviews, and I have to write articles, but my goal is to take bits and pieces of this and teach it, like let other people learn it and teach it. Because there's a whole, it's not just a book, it's what, there's more to it, to how to, like you said, parenting and, all different areas that can be taken from it. So I'm hoping.
Yeah, I see big things. I see the version like the dummies book, programming for dummies and cooking for dummies. And not that this is the dummy version. I could say chicken soup for the soul in pregnancy, chicken soup for the soul in parenting. Those franchises can easily become, what this book can easily become one of those franchises. I do see.
Yeah.
Can this be used across sports? Can this be like, for example, tennis or women's basketball? Are women handled differently than men are in terms of making adjustments?
No, it's not. It's not gender driven. Although in the book, I do have a little snippet about when I talk to women versus men. When I was first talking about adjustments, men resonated with that word a little bit more than women did, which kind of surprised me, until I started talking about the titles of the patterns, like the Maverick or the Steady Eddie or the zipper. Then I kind of got more of the attention of the women. But at first, it didn't seem to resonate with women. Does that make sense to you? Like, do you think that?
Well, I don't know why it wouldn't make sense to women. I'm fine with the word adjustments, unless women all of a sudden became defensive, and I don't know.
No, I don't.
Was it like telling a woman to calm down? if you were You never tell a woman to calm down.
I
Calm
am,
down.
I'm fine. No, I think it was just more, they didn't grab it. They weren't like, oh, that's a cool word, oh, I want to learn more. I mean, it wasn't, that word didn't draw like a huge interest at first, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I think that, there would be, other than like that, there's no other difference in how it can be used in any sport. It can be used in golf, can be used in tennis, can be any sport, really anyone that needs to perform or be productive
Mm-hmm.
in whatever you're doing. It's learning the way you make adjustments and helping to bring the vocabulary and the way to optimize it for everybody else so they can learn how to make adjustments, because
Yep.
people really don't handle adjustments. A lot of people don't handle it well. They really don't.
Yeah, no, for certainly, whether it's physical adjustments or mental adjustments, you just always kind of revert back to what you were doing before. I don't know if it's a body mechanics thing or if it's a mental mechanics thing. We see it in dieting, we see it in habits, we see it in everything. People just gravitate back. So that being said, what's the refresher? What, a little bug in here. What brings them back on course to, we made this adjustment, let's stick with this adjustment? Is it a
Yeah.
magic word or?
No, that's an awesome question. So what happens is when we do this in sports, we'll do what I call adjustment optimization, and I always tell the coach, this is going to need a tweak at the next level for sure. Maybe by the end of the season, but definitely at the next level. So, and the reason is because there's a new uncertainty. So we have these patterns, we can optimize it for, a certain period of time, but to make it a lasting optimization, it requires a little bit more focus on the weak area. But once you know the tools, like once you know the 5 elements and you know the tools of the 5 elements, you can do it yourself. Like you realize, oh, okay, I'm doing this. And a lot of it has to do with teaching you how to handle your internal timing, which sounds kind of crazy, but it really works. And
What is
that,
internal timing? I know you mentioned it before, but what is internal timing?
well, so I'm going to do the little test that I did to my daughter. Okay. So do you want a little test?
I do.
Okay.
And
You
the
said,
5 elements, is that the PAR, the results of the PAR test? Is that what the 5 elements are?
that's in the test. But it's what we're actually testing and how
Oh, those are the elements are the test. Okay.
okay, so when I hit start, I'm gonna say go, and you tell me when you think 4 seconds is up. This is just one idea,
Okay.
one way to test it. Okay, ready? Go.
1, 2, 3, 4.
That was 3 minutes and 49 seconds.
Oh, 3 seconds and
3 seconds,
3.49 seconds.
Okay, I need some coffee. No, yeah. So
I was a little quick. I was a little quick on the drum.
you were a little quick. So would you say you're kind of a faster thinker, faster processor?
Yes, I'm very spontaneous. I'm very, yes. If we go, we go. If we go, we go now.
Okay. Well, and so your internal timing is fast. So you probably have a family member. It's not quite as fast as yours.
Nope.
So that would probably drive you crazy. So we all have this internal timing. And this is just one simple little way to show you, but we actually have other ways to measure it. And then we go, okay, now how does that change in certain situations? And once we kind of show you the timing thing, because that has a lot to do with how we want to move and what we want to move in, what direction. So that's a big driver internally. So once we kind of satisfy that and tell you, like, show people how to work with that, it's a game changer.
I'm going to have to take these tests and do these activities, but not because I think I need it, but because I think I should. We all need it, right? We're still on that road to bettering ourselves and being our best self.
Fun to do. It's fun to learn, and it's fun to show other people. I mean, that's why that's partly the reason why I wrote this book, because I saw the aha moments and the faces light up when we started showing some simple things. And I was like, wow, we don't really talk about this as a society. We don't do much about this.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of, I think it gives you a lot of peace when you know how to work with this kind of thing. And that's why I put peace on the front cover too, because I think we all need a little bit more peace. And I think that this is one way of getting there, you know?
So I want to go in one direction, which would bring us back to what we talked about this morning. But then I also want to go in the other direction, and I can't decide which direction. I'll go in the other direction and ask you, how did you scale this? Because you and all of Major League Baseball, teams and everyone, you can't have you everywhere all across the nation. How did you scale this, and who helped you, and how is this going right now?
Well, the business that I had was scaled already and I sold it in 2019. This is the scaling, having the book is for people to understand the concepts. Then inside of baseball, what I would like to do and what I plan to do is train internally, possibly some teams, people inside of teams or people who want to work with teams that we've identified. So there's
So with that, but that wouldn't be your the people. Did you sell your company? The
the one that I had.
consulting.
No, that was the education company. I sold that in 2019. So this company is more of a consulting company. So my role, what I want to do is consult with those who want to learn how to do it.
Okay, I got it. And the other one, the previous education company, people came to you. You didn't go to them.
Correct. Well, I mean, we had a lot of, that's where we had the clients, a lot of our baseball clients. And so we worked with multiple teams. And we worked with Major League Baseball itself. And that's the one, and I still consult for them too. But this piece is, to me, for me, it's not just baseball, but beyond baseball. So I think that there's, so many other A, sports, and B, business people and other people, like you said, parents, there's different areas where this can be applied.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be just so narrow in baseball. I wanted to kind of go a little broader. So, but I don't want to be, it's not going to be just me teaching everybody. I feel like I'd be crazy and I don't want to do that. So it'd be teaching others to teach others.
Okay. So there will be people that are spreading the word and conducting the sessions, and you may have workshops and educational seminars. Other people will be doing that.
Right.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, the other direction that now we're going to go into when I chose a fork in the road and we went that way. So we'll come back and go the other way. We have your PAR test, and then you have your labels. Say the labels again.
When you say labels, what do you mean?
You're based on the PAR test, you're a zipper, or you're.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, the 7 patterns. Yep, the basic patterns.
Now,
will you ask me what they all were?
Oh yeah, I mean I'd be curious to know that too, but you'd have to also like frame what that means. Like you're zipper, so that means you act quickly or something like that.
Right. And that's all in here. But basically, like there are 7 basic patterns. Doesn't mean you can't be outside of one of those or a nuance of one of those. But we have like the All-Star, Steady Eddie, the Maverick, the Zipper, the Mascot, the Free Agent. There's just we use baseball names because
Do those become a crutch? Do those become like listen, husband, I'm gonna do it quick, and this is how I am because I'm a zipper. So
and I know where that's coming from.
Yes, it came from a conversation this morning where we were talking about a different function or dysfunction or label or whatever, and people seem to use it. It could be very true, it could be not true, but once you're labeled as a zipper, we'll call it a zipper. You're now part of the zipper club, and you're amongst other zippers. And I love my zippers, and just like us because we're zippers, and accept us with our flaws. And we're always constantly working on our zipper flaws. Oh, I think I made a rhyme.
Well, you're right, because labels, I mean, that's what the Enneagram does. It's what a lot of things do, right? Anytime you have a test with some kind of outcome, then that's what you are. The thing that I think makes us slightly different is that we talk about those, but then we say, yeah, that's where everybody we tested, we found these 7 patterns. But the best of the best, way up here, we call those people $1,000,000 adjusters, and they don't have those patterns. They have traits that they have exhibited. I mean, they may have been a pattern, and they may have a pattern type, but we don't talk about the pattern. We talk about the traits of those guys, the cream of the crop, the people who can sustain at the highest levels for a long period of time.
So is the goal to take a zipper to $1,000,000 adjuster?
That's what a zipper wants to do that.
Yeah.
That's what they want to do. So yes, that's the idea, is like, you have these traits, and and these are great, and we can optimize these. Do you want to go to this, do you want to learn how to get over here?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I think this is slightly different. We're not just trying to keep somebody in a label.
Mm-hmm. That really, that makes it a very good book for you to have a good outcome, as opposed to have a good excuse.
Yes. Yes.
I think I got myself in so much trouble this morning
I didn't hear the whole thing. You'll have to tell me why, because I was kind of in on some of it, and I didn't get the whole piece of it.
I was just seeing that people are just taking comfort in sharing. I'll just call it like, I'm a Gemini. Mm-hmm. So if we Geminis have our whatever is, described as a Gemini, I kind of think of it as bipolar. But you have like, or the evil and the good, the angel and the devil, which I'm sure it's not that. Any astrological person would probably say you're getting it all wrong, like your horoscope type person. Yeah. But that's just what. So if I waft back and forth on something, or if I decided this direction and changed my mind, I'm like, well, I'm a Gemini, so
right.
That's my reasoning. But yeah, I think I called a lot of people out and said, no, stop leaning back on your declared dysfunction, because first of all, it may not be so. Second of all, if you're going to a professional to get diagnosed as this in particular, you might just be in an echo chamber. They get paid if you have this dysfunction. That'd be great for them. So yes, of course you have this dysfunction. Back in the day, it was everyone was agoraphobic, and then everyone was bipolar, and then everyone was ADHD now. Right. And I think we were talking about the ADHD label, if it's now revealed. But I think people don't even know that ADHD, the H means hyperactive. So you have people that we've seen and heard who are very laid back people. Yes. They're definitely not hyperactive. They should know what the letters stand for at the adult diagnosed ADHD, and, all these things that they keep coming to the table with.
Well, that's why, I was kind of curious. I was going to ask you, what did you think of the bomb that I dropped on that when I was saying about the genetic, I thought, well, okay, so if we're going to diagnose ourselves that way and we're going to be okay with that, then would you go and change your genes? Would you go change your DNA? And then we got really quiet. And I was like,
you did bring to the table that they're working on some kind of scientific study where you can take something to alter your DNA to take this dysfunction away, or to take this, to remove this from you genetically. And yes, it was some crickets. Because I think people then started to question, well, first of all, that, do I really have this or not have this? And to what lengths would I go to get rid of this? Because there's also, not only are you altering your genome, which is freaking scary, but now you don't have that anymore. Mm-hmm. So people, in order to fix it, then you can't be part of the conversation in the ADHD club and the zipper club. And so some people really define themselves now with with this.
But I also think it's an interesting phenomena why they do that, because for one, I think there's an identity crisis in general. People have this identity, or who am I? Uh, and then there's also this, I don't even want to say it's acceptance. I want to say it's almost like we have to say that we have something so that we can be acceptable. We have to be um, like,
Odd.
yeah, we have to be flawed. That's a good, because then we're relatable.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can have a conversation. So I have to put it out there on this plate for you. Here's how I'm flawed. Here it is. And now we can have a, now I've, we can be, I'm okay with you, you're okay with me, I'm okay with you. We can have this conversation. And it's almost like flaws. And I don't want to say flaws. I almost want to say like, I don't know, it's just, there has to be something that makes me very, that you can tap into me and feel like I'm throwing myself out there for you, or I'm giving you this piece of back information.
Yeah.
So you will have,
There seems to now be a vulnerability to you
yeah,
and a transparency. And if you notice, I'm throwing out all of the latest buzzwords, even
yeah,
companies use them. We're going to be transparent, and people, where I'm going to make myself vulnerable to you. I don't ever want to be vulnerable to someone else. Like, why would I want to, you know, open myself up to that? You're supposed to be protecting your house, your home, your children, yourself. It's not a goal to become vulnerable. I don't
right.
think anyone in the military would ever say, my goal is to become vulnerable.
Funny because that, you're right. And now everybody's bought into that whole idea. So you have to, like, they're looking for that. But see, from a background of engineering, I have this, like, the technologies out there to see where people are talking and having conversations and doing all these things. And I think a lot of this is being, um, I think we're falling into the trap of following what technology wants us to do, and how
Mm.
this can be utilized for certain things. So, oh, here's this group on Clubhouse that has this ADD group. Now, guess what? We've figured out how to alter the genome for ADD. Let's market to them. They're already self-proclaimed ADHDers. That's an easy marketing list. Let's just go ahead and tell them, here's how you can fix that.
Yep. Yeah. It is interesting. People do like to belong. The way that social media has arisen is it's a community builder. We have communities that no longer exist. I'm from a small town in upstate New York. My grandparents were born there. My parents were born there. I was born there. We were 3 generations. Everyone was basically related to everyone. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure I dated my cousin at some point, but you're no longer doing that now. Everyone
That's the subjective probability went wrong.
standards were set very, very low after a while. But you have now things that establish community. You're on Facebook, you're part of this group, you're part of that group, you're, like you said, with the community, the Clubhouse communities. And it's always been, people love to commiserate. And if you can be labeled and commiserate, and then you also have this problem where I could see you seeing this as a problem, where people are much more comfortable in their dysfunction and don't want to get fixed and be brought up to the $1 million adjustments
Yeah.
level.
I think that the thing that really, it's like labels. If you use labels as a way to get what you want, versus work hard, as we talked about from the very beginning, do things well, um, struggle a little bit, even, and challenge yourself. You're going to grow if you're able to do that. And I'm not saying if you have something that's life threatening or something, but just if you have the ability, you might find that gives you a lot of confidence to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm with you on that. I think I've seen that shift and I question it too. And I say, well, okay, but now what? What does that mean? Okay, you have ADD, you have ADHD. Okay.
Right. Now what?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. And, I come from a background of my brother's 52, and he had what was never really labeled. He was labeled a bad kid. He was put in the G classes and the resource room where all the other misbehaved kids were because he couldn't sit still. He couldn't pay attention. He would have been ADHD, and they were starting to label kids, but they called them LD. It was learning disabled.
yeah.
You were lumped in with the bad kids who were just misbehaving in class too. And he was medicated with Ritalin by a doctor who didn't even know how to. And, it had a bad reaction within my brother. He's a kid, and he's like, I'll never take a pill again. And, he suffered from the medical industry not knowing too much about it, not studying about it, and the school systems not providing all the facilities that they have now, all the on-time tests and separate learnings and all. Let's learn the way the kids want to learn. It's a much better life nowadays. So I do know what it looks like, and I do know what it can do to your future.
How many athletes, male athletes, we see with that? It's incredible. That's why we know that testosterone has a lot to do with it, and which makes a whole lot of sense when you look at who's on Ritalin in schools. It's mostly the boys. And when do they get on Ritalin? It's when the testosterone starts to come, starts to begin spiking. Um, what about that?
Yeah.
And I think again, it's because the school structure doesn't really fit a boy with growing testosterone levels.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And this environment where people are quick to medicate, that's the first direction that they pursue. And they are labeled. The boys are now, well, I'm ADHD and I'm going to wear a patch. But you're right. There is testosterone surging, but more studies are currently being done, which is wonderful. And you hope that budgets and schools keep up with the fact that send the boys out to the playground. They need to go out to the playground, like physically need to go out to the playground and get all that out more than the girls do. But then you become like equality, and the girls need to go just as much as the guys. But boys and girls are different, and you can't make them have the same body and have the same needs. But I do see what you're saying. But we are much more in tune with it. And if we're not in tune, someone will start a Facebook group.
Oh,
how do you deal with like your players when they have, let's say, I don't even know if they call it anything, but a lot of people label nervousness, and they label it anxiety. And that label allows it to be, I think, a little bit more debilitating than it actually is. But because you get up to go hit a ball that's coming at you 95, 100 miles an hour. Shit, that'll make you nervous. Do your players suffer from anxiety, or is this?
Yeah, but I was just going to say I have 2% of my battery. Can I go I need to grab my charger. If you want to. Okay, sorry. Hold on one second. I do want to answer your question, but I don't want it to drop.
Okay, we're back. Sorry we had to step away. I think we both ended up draining our batteries pretty well. I sacrificed all of my lighting here, and you had to plug back in and get a little juice. So I think where we left off was in the place of anxiety. How do your players handle anxiety? And was that where we left off? Because that's also a big buzzword.
You asked me if they have like a ball coming at them 100 miles an hour, how do they deal with that anxiety? There's something called positive psychology. It is in sports, in pro sports. There is a lot of people who specialize in this, and they work on trying to help players handle this. There's so many techniques out there, from visualization to breathing, just a lot of different ways that in pro sports they work on how to handle that type of anxiety. Even in practices, some of the drills that they do and some of the things that they do, meditation, mindfulness, a lot of those different things are used. One of the things that I really saw that was helpful when we did some sessions with players was this whole idea of internal timing and applying it toward a task, kind of changing the preparation. So there are some things you can do for sure. It's just a matter of what the, I'm not a positive psychology coach. So I'm not going to be able to speak to that, like how they would do it, but I can tell you from the standpoint of in education as a mom, and just in general, some of the things that I've tried that have worked. And they have a lot to do with teaching them some of these basic things that I have in the book. The timing thing seems to really make a difference as well when it's combined with a strategy, some kind of strategic action. It is pretty dynamic. So that's what I've seen.
Is there a difference between general nervousness and an anxious feeling and the labeling of anxiety? Is there a difference between, I guess one is an adjective, having an anxious feeling, and then the other is a noun, you have anxiety.
Yeah, I think everyone gets nervous at certain times.
Yeah.
Anxiety clinically is different than I think just a general anxiety, like a moment, anxiety in a certain situation. And there's clinical anxiety, which is definitely more broad-based, more chronic. And I think that is depends on different things in the environment. I think that is a little bit more outside of positive psychology and more into regular psychology. And yeah, so
that's a little bit of a demon to battle, I suppose.
Yeah. And I think there's a difference in that. Some people say, oh, I have this label. Well, at what level is the label? Is it just, uncertainty? Do you have anxiety when you do public speaking, or do you have anxiety all the time? I mean, there's just different levels of it, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Is it debilitating? Because we all get that rush of the adrenaline rush running through, and it's icy cold. It courses through your veins. It gives you that feeling. I don't know if it really does course through your veins in that sense, but it does give you that feeling. And that's pretty normal. Like that's on the spectrum of normal. So when does it become debilitating, I guess is the question. But yeah, so it sounds like you have a bunch of tools in the toolkit on how to handle those nervous moments, and again, applies to life.
Well, and that's why I think the word adjustment is so key, because instead of saying, hey, you're going to go through 10 years of therapy and you're going to have, you're going to have all this, just figured out. I think if we realize that life is just a series of adjustments, like it's not always go in a straight line, and you have to, adjust accordingly. I think that makes people realize that, oh, okay, I can handle this. I just have to, if this doesn't work, I just make my adjustment and, go from there. So.
Yep. Well, I think you're doing great things, and I will be happy to be an ambassador and spread the word, or become a teacher and go out on the road and teach what you've learned, what you've gathered, what you've discovered. But yeah, I mean, I'm all in, because you're doing it and doing it well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And you've been so supportive from the very beginning, and I've always felt like you have such a wisdom too, yeah, you've done a lot of things in your career and your family, and you have a lot to offer. So
thank you. So far, so good. Every day we do one day at a time. Everyone's like, oh, how are your kids doing or whatever? I'm like, they're good today. Today's fine. Everything. You can only go by.
No parent ever says, oh, I did it perfect and that's all there, and we all know that there's things we could do a little differently or done better, and you never know if is it ever really done? I mean, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
It's all good. And what's the name of, okay, we'll do a couple reminders. What is the name of your daughter's podcast? Because anyone that's listening to this, I do want them to listen to her. I applaud anyone that's trying to get people's attention and bring it to their space. And from listening to her, she's a good listen, and she too asks really good questions. So what is her podcast?
It's called She, She by Jordan Lee Dooley. So yeah, that's her podcast.
And what is the name of your book again?
It is called $1 Million Adjustments.
There it is, $1 Million Adjustments. And you could pre-order it on Amazon, and you could probably order it from your website too. What's the name of your website?
It's majorleagueconsulting.com. That's a lot longer, majorleagueconsulting.com. But you can also go down to like Barnes & Noble and order it on Barnes & Noble.
Oh, okay.
They can also, send it to you or whatnot. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, I did order it from Amazon a while ago. I would like a signed copy. So when I receive it, I'm going to send it to you to sign, so that when you're famous, I can have that in my possession and be like, I knew her when.
Yeah, I'm not really a fame seeker. So if it happens, I'm going to be not too, I'm going to shy away from it. I've seen it a lot, trust me, in what I do. And I'm not sure it's the greatest thing ever. So
yeah, that's true. Well, there's fame and there's power. And I think that you may just have the power to, to change people and behaviors. So if not fame, then power.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, that's a good word. We'll see how that goes. I just hope like if it helps, great. That's the point, right?
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, thank you for straining your battery and taking so much time with me.
I think we need to make a shirt though. The shirt should say "Talk Nerdy to Me." I like that. When you said like that should be on a t-shirt.
It is fun. I love science speak. I'm totally all about science speak. And I'm so like, your inquisitive mind led you to this. You were not a trained psychologist. It sounds like you went to school for engineering. You had jobs that did not include poking rods into people's brains, but yet you were inquisitive enough to figure out and check under the hood of, why people do what they do. And make people a little bit better. And improving airbags was important when you were doing it.
It still is. But there's the systemic approach and the scientific approach to things is what you learn in the sciences. So all I just did was apply it to learning. And if you have that kind of training, I think it definitely transfers, it's transferable. So
yeah. And that also is a dying art, just being able to put science and the other things together and then test it and make it fail and retest it, and the whole scientific method, and seeing if the results come out consistently. And we live in a day and age, unfortunately, where people just run with the data that they have or the one conclusion that they found. And especially if it reinforces a particular narrative, that's awesome. So we lost all of the source checking, fact checking, break it a bunch of times and fix it, those types of things. So you definitely we're trained well and appropriately to be giving this life advice.
Thank you. And have you ever really looked at the definition of science?
What is it?
This is so relevant right now because we're all taught to like trust the science. But if you really look at the definition, Merriam-Webster definition of science, it's basically all the activities that have to do with observation and experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
So we're saying that we're, science is experimenting. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
So
interesting. It does cross over into an art at times, but it shouldn't.
Right. Well, yeah. That's another talk for another day.
Yeah. Well, okay. Go do something better than this. Thank you for spending time with me, and I will we'll call it a day.
I don't know if there's anything better than this. This was pretty fun.
That's exactly how I felt after we had like our phone conversation a month or two ago. I'm like, this is just the most enjoyable conversation.
Oh,
Where
thanks.
are you, by the way? Like physically in Florida or Chicago? Or...
No, I'm near Chicago. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In the cold Midwest. Where are you?
New Jersey.
Oh, okay. So you're not that far.
No,
Okay.
there's nothing major going on here.
Yep. Yep.
Well, although we aren't too far from the ocean, so we do have
Oh,
some
that's,
beauty.
yeah. I saw some of your Instagram pictures where you were traveling or doing something by the, it was beautiful. I'm like, wow, they're in a great, that looks like fun.
Yeah.
So,
I do turn things off and I do find moments to enjoy life. Actually, I try and find every day to enjoy life
good for you. You should.
without the excuse of being labeled.
Well, thank you so much. And I appreciate the plug and the interest in what I've got going on. And I'm sure if I don't talk to you soon, I'll see you or talk to you on Clubhouse.
That's true. But I do want to talk to you soon because we're good friends now.
Yeah, for sure. Which is awesome.
Okay, take care. Thank you
Thanks
so
so much.
much.